Thank you for joining us for Talking Sleep, a podcast of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Seema Khosla, Medical Director of the North Dakota Center for Sleep in Fargo. Today's episode is sponsored by Apnea. As we take down the holiday decorations and examine our New Year's resolutions, many of our patients are doing the same thing. We are sure to see more consumer-facing sleep technology in our clinic visits. We have chatted with several members of the AASM Emerging Technology Committee to better understand how this technology is evolving. Our guest today is a clinician from industry. Dr. Matt Bianchi is a research scientist on the health technologies team at Apple. He is board certified in neurology and sleep medicine and maintains a clinical practice at the Stanford Sleep Clinic. Apple released a sleep apnea screening algorithm on the Apple Watch a few months ago, and you may have already seen patients who were alerted to the possibility of underlying sleep apnea through a notification on their watch. Dr. Bianchi is here to go through the algorithm with us and shed some light on what this can and cannot do. He is here to help provide a framework to understand these data and whether or not we should make clinical decisions based on this information. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Seema.
So tell me about this. Tell me about this feature and what it does.
So we had a very focused goal in mind to chip away at this issue of such a high percentage of undiagnosed sleep apnea cases out there. We wanted to offer Apple Watch users a way to gather information about their breathing at night and receive a notification if signs of moderate to severe sleep apnea were detected so that they can talk to their doctor.
Okay, so how does it work? From what I was reading, it monitors someone's sleep over a moving 30-day window. Is that how it works?
So what it does is it tracks a new health kit metric called breathing disturbances on a night-by-night basis for any night a user onboarded to the feature is tracking their sleep. That's one part of the feature, that nightly breathing disturbances value. The second layer is a notification logic that looks at a 30-day window of those breathing disturbances values to determine if consistent elevations in those values are present. That 30-day window repeats so that up to 12 views can be found in a year.
Okay, so how tell me, what is a breathing disturbance? How does this work?
So breathing disturbances are interruptions in breathing that correlate with apnea and hypopnea events that we would score on a clinical basis using PSG or home sleep apnea testing. So we actually train machine learning algorithms based on those gold standard human annotations that we have concurrently with watchwear so that we can use our algorithms to estimate that apnea-hypopnea index with this metric called breathing disturbances. Now, it's not the same as an AHI. We use a different set of sensors, and this is not a diagnosis, but the breathing disturbances is an event rate per hour, just like the AHI is. And it correlates with the AHI, but again, this is not a diagnosis, and we want to make sure everyone understands that those numbers are not interchangeable.
So does it use oximetry?
It does not. We use only the 3-axis accelerometer in the watch. And it's worth lingering on that.
I was going to say, how do you figure that out based on accelerometry?
Yeah, so as I think we all know, accelerometry has been used in sleep medicine and sleep research for several decades in the form of actigraphy. Now, it turns out that if you look at the accelerometer signal at that high frequency signal over time, you can actually see small motions of the body, including the oscillations of respiration, transmitted from the thorax right down the arm into the wrist. You can actually see that level of physiology. And that's different than collapsing, if you will, the accelerometer signal into 30-second or 60-second motion count bins. So we're not doing that. We're keeping that high frequency signal. And because this is perhaps a new view of a classic technology, we wanted to show everyone in figure 1 of our online publicly available validation paper what that looks like, aligning that accelerometer signal with the gold standard thoracic belt from an overnight test, so that you can see with your own eyes those oscillations reading out at the wrist just as they read out in a chest belt.
Huh. Okay, so is this sort of meant to identify everyone with sleep apnea?
That's a great question. Short answer is no, but I'll clarify in 2 parts. Our claim is to identify and notify individuals for risk of moderate to severe sleep apnea. So we carve out that threshold of AHI greater than 15. And the second part has to do with the performance and some decisions we made about how the algorithm works that favors specificity. And that means we don't catch all of the cases of moderate to severe sleep apnea either. And
so it's meant, sort of big, bad, ugly sleep apnea will probably be identified, but won't catch mild.
Correct. We reasoned that level is priority by clinical standards to treat regardless of symptoms, for example, as I think we're all familiar with. And that's where we thought we could make the biggest impact.
So I feel like this is always an ongoing issue, right? That there's a new gadget and a new device, and there's a new metric maybe to understand. And I feel like over the years, we've had sort of this transition where initially I think a lot of people were dismissive of information from wearables, for example. Do you still see this? I mean, do we still have uncertainties as sort of sleep medicine people? And is it reasonable to have uncertainties about wearable data?
I think it's safe to say yes. It's a very natural instinct. We should have that instinct. And it's partly why we wanted to be more transparent about what went into this feature, to release the validation work at the same time that the feature was released. So we at least take away some of that uncertainty, the black box nature of things, the fact that this is a new approach, the fact that consumer wearables were not making regulated claims until the modern era. So this is a very appropriate instinct, and I hope that this conversation is just one step towards alleviating some of that, and at the very least, letting the audience see how we approached it, see the data for themselves, and then make more of an informed judgment for their practice, for their context.
Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the sleep apnea screening algorithm on the Apple Watch. You're listening to Talking Sleep from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine.
Dive deeper into the future of sleep apnea therapy with the Apnea Sleep Care Program. Once we receive the PAP referral, our team springs into action, offering patients a seamless transition into therapy. Patients start by selecting how they want to begin their sleep journey: in-person care, virtual care, or self-directed care. With ongoing therapy support, including coaching, digital resources, and video assistance, we're committed to ensuring every patient's success. We stay connected with our patients with live calls, texts, emails, and IVR, all designed to make adherence a breeze. And with our supply schedule program, replacements are delivered like clockwork. Experience the difference of an enhanced sleep therapy program with Apnea Healthcare. Discover more about our innovative sleep program online today at apnea.com.
Welcome back to Talking Sleep. We're talking with Dr. Matt Bianchi from Apple about their sleep apnea screening algorithm on the Apple Watch. So have you always kind of been a gadget guy? Like, have you always kind of believed the information from wearables?
Well, it's funny. I started off actually skeptical myself.
Okay.
I've been working on wearables since Sleep Fellowship, which is approaching, let's see, 17 years ago, roughly. I can't even remember. And part of it, even back then, was this feeling that, hey, sleep tracking in the home has some advantages compared to tracking in a controlled circumstance. There are always trade-offs. And I wanted to understand, I knew there were limitations back then. I wanted to understand those limitations, try to see if there was a future where we could at least start improving on them and bring it closer to a world where the clinic actually would entertain this kind of data. Fast forward to now, we're talking about things like FDA clearance of clinical claims. That's an incredible evolution to think that has happened in the last decade or so.
So, and I think it's important to kind of understand, what this will and will not, help us with. So, we kind of accept that it's not meant to find mild sleep apnea, right? So then our, patients, consumers shouldn't be using this to rule out sleep apnea, right?
Absolutely. Excuse me. And this is a fantastic point. In fact, arguably, the way to think about this feature is the opposite. It's more of a rule-in experience. And this maybe will become more clear when we talk about some of the performance accuracy metrics. But from a user standpoint, we explain through the experience, through the language of the education that comes with the experience, that this is not meant to catch all cases of sleep apnea, and that if you have concerns as a user, as a potential patient, you have symptoms, you have concerns for whatever reason, you should talk to your doctor. You should not rely on this feature to find it for you. It's more, we sometimes call it a guardian feature. So rather than saying, start with your concern, then get a watch, like some of our other features, wear the watch. It's tracking in the background. It will poke you if it finds something, but don't wait for that if you're already worried.
That's a really good point. So if you're worried about it, go to the doctor, sort of skip.
Yes.
Do not pass go. Do not wait and get a watch. Just if you think you have sleep apnea, just go and have that evaluated. But it is maybe something that if you get it for Christmas and you happen to, it happens to give you a notification, then maybe you should pay attention to it.
Yeah, and not just maybe. When we talk about how we set this up, that is where our confidence lies.
Really?
Yes, in that notification.
Okay, so tell me a little bit. So the confidence is that if you get a notification, you need to do something about it.
That's right.
Okay, so tell me about the performance.
Yeah, so let me put it in context with how we developed the feature, and then how we how the performance actually involves a purposeful choice about sensitivity and specificity. So with any machine learning algorithm, we needed to recruit a large and diverse population of individuals for our training and testing work to develop this algorithm. That means for us, over 4,700 adults underwent over 11,000 nights of gold standard testing with either in-lab PSG or level 3 at-home sleep apnea testing kits. And we take that data, and it's aligned with the watch accelerometer data on those same nights, so that we can train up the algorithm to find apnea and hypopnea events scored by a gold standard PSG tech supervised by a sleep clinician as clinical standard. I should point out that when we say apnea hypopnea index here and hypopneas, we're talking about the 4% desaturation rule for this feature.
So, but will it distinguish between apneas and hypopneas then?
It will not.
Okay.
The classifier looks for events, whether they're apneas or hypopneas, centrals or obstructive. It's just looking for anything that would meet a 4% AHI. Gets a label as an event. And so a breathing disturbance value is that umbrella look without any subtyping. Yeah.
So centrals are in there too.
That's correct.
Okay.
So we talk about sleep apnea as an umbrella term. This is not limited to obstructive. We don't make any distinction.
Okay.
Now, once we have that algorithm development work with those 11,000 nights, we lock the algorithm and then perform a totally distinct new study with pre-specified endpoints of performance to submit to the FDA in the United States and to other regulatory bodies around the world. That study had about just under 1,500 people in it, and interestingly was the largest study actually ever submitted to the FDA.
Really?
For a sleep apnea technology.
Okay.
Yeah, not for any purpose.
I was like, wow.
Ever. For a sleep apnea technology. And so let's talk about that, because that's the performance claim, right? Is the one from the pre-specified performance separate study, right?
Okay.
So let's talk about how we approach that.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into some technical terms here.
Okay, I appreciate the warning.
Some of them are familiar to people. So this is a binary classifier, meaning it only has two outputs. You either get a notification or not.
Okay.
For a binary truth label, you either have moderate to severe sleep apnea or not, based on AHI 15.
Okay.
And so when we have binary classifier circumstance like this, we can use our familiar terms of sensitivity and specificity, right? But the way we think about it is that to develop this algorithm, we prioritize pushing that area under the curve, that AUC value, as high as we can. That signifies our ability to separate these two classes, moderate to severe or not. But we're not done there. We have to purposefully choose where on that receiving operator curve, or ROC, we want the feature to live. That has to match the use case. And so for a consumer electronics device being used at scale, like the Apple Watch, we reasoned that we must minimize false positives. That has to be our priority. Yeah. It's about trust of our users. We don't want to send them unnecessarily into care. And from the healthcare system, we do not want to flood the system with unnecessary visits. So when we make that choice of low false positives, that means high specificity. We know that comes with a trade-off of sensitivity. Those two are almost you could say a zero-sum game. You can't have both. So with that context, we went into this validation study with the FDA with pre-specified endpoints, which I'm happy to say we met. That's why we're talking today. That we found in that study sensitivity of 66.3% and a high specificity of 98.5%. Now, that means there were 1.5% false positives, right? 98.5 is that far away from 100. It turned out all of those individuals had mild sleep apnea.
Oh, no way. Okay.
We never triggered a notification, zero, on the several hundred individuals in that study who had normal AHI values. So bringing that all into a full circle from your original question, what this means is that the confidence is in the positive predictive value of the notification.
So pay attention.
Yes. If you're a patient, you can take it to your doctor with confidence. And if you're the physician seeing that PDF, that notification information, you can bet if in your evaluation of the patient, if you decide to perform overnight testing with PSG or HSAT, you're going to find something.
Okay. And so they get the notification, and then is there like some education about like what is sleep apnea and what do you do now?
Yes, absolutely. I think Apple, across all of our health products, we prioritize an educational piece.
Okay.
And so for every health kit metric in the health app, there will be articles and information about what the health kit metric means. And especially for our regulated features like the sleep apnea notification, there's education on what is sleep apnea, what to expect from the feature, and what to do if you've gotten a notification, and essentially reasons why you should take this seriously for your health.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because the sensitivity of 66%, I think people kind of took that on social media at one point and were like, well, it's just better than a coin flip. But that's not the right way of looking at it, right? It's more of the, okay, but hang on, this is if it is there and it tells you something, that means something, like you got to do something about it.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you raised this, because I think if folks understood that that operating point, that pair of sensitivity and specificity is a choice. It's not, 66 is not an algorithm limitation. It's an intentional choice. I could make the sensitivity 98.5 right now, but that would mean specificity would go down to 66.
Yeah.
And if Apple sent every third watch user with this feature into clinic, most of them being false positives, that would be, I think, not a good outcome. So I think once framed as an active choice, then you can see, hopefully, you might still disagree with false positives being the right choice here, but I think that is our reasoning.
But it's like, it's a different mindset, right? Like, it's not a diagnostic test. This is sort of screening a large population and then notification that, hey, there's something, because we know 80% is undiagnosed. And honestly, like, that number hasn't changed. Like, we're the same vintage, I think, because my fellowship was around the same time, I think. And so, like, that number hasn't changed since I was a fellow. It's always 80%, right?
Yeah,
of undiagnosed.
Despite all this, I think, valiant effort to raise awareness, to increase the workforce in the sleep field, it's become a household, terminology. You can go through TSA with your CPAP machine. I mean, despite all that, we still have this huge undiagnosed problem. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We need to chip away at that, and we need to do it in a way that at scale will not overburden with false positives. And that's the rationale.
The AASM is celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2025. Here's Dr. Meyer Krieger sharing the story of the origins of the first textbook in sleep medicine.
And I went to Bill Dement and I broached the idea of a textbook in sleep medicine, and he said something I will never forget. He said, you can't have a field without a textbook, without a body of knowledge. And that was the spark that kind of lit me into really a task that I did for the next 35 to 40 years. And in the early days of the book, there was no internet, and people would actually send you chapters that were hand-typed. And it wasn't until the second edition that people actually would send files initially on diskettes with the various programs that had come out, WordPerfect and Word. So in the first edition, if I had to ask someone to revise something, you can't imagine how much stress that was, because the whole damn thing had to be retyped and redone and rethought. Pictures were also a big problem. There were no digital files. So all of the artwork, and there was a lot of artwork and a lot of polysomnograms in the book, they all had to come as photographs of actual photographs. And sometimes people would send negatives of photographs that we then had to sort of turn into actual images that could go into the book.
Now back to our conversation. Okay, so just to reiterate, and just so I'm completely get this is a screening tool. It's not meant to take over home sleep apnea testing, right?
So absolutely not replacing diagnostic testing with home sleep testing or with PSG. This is an over-the-counter feature designed to help users at risk, based on their own physiology, make purposeful and intentional decisions to seek care. We want to get them in the door. Then the physician does their job. So that is our goal.
So I'm trying to think about how else, how what am I going to see in the new year for my patients, right? Or what I'm going to see, moving forward. So if I have somebody who has sleep apnea and they're on treatment, can I use this to sort of look at this plus their PAP download?
So the short answer is that our indication with regulatory bodies like the FDA is that the intended use has two requirements.
Okay.
One is that you have to be an adult, age 18 or over, and the second is that you can't already be diagnosed with sleep apnea.
Ah, okay.
Yes. All of our training, testing, validation, user experience is focused on this idea that if you have signs, consistent signs over time, and we're tapping you to encourage you to seek care, all of this work is focused on that. And that's a line, if you will, in the regulatory sand and the intended use sand, that once you're in care, we don't have any claim about what happens after that.
So like when you transition from user or consumer to patient.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, well, I'll just add that because there may be, say, research interest in this new data type, that breathing disturbances value, that number that is written every night that you track with Watch is written to HealthKit, and that can be exported as part of a consenting user subject in a research study for various purposes. So that capability is there, just like any HealthKit metric can be exported for research. But our clinical indication from the FDA is for undiagnosed users.
Oh, I didn't know that you could do that for research, export it for research.
Yes, we have an entire framework called Research Kit that is the sort of parallel to HealthKit. You can think of HealthKit as where all the numbers and values and information is stored, and Research Kit as the way to help make that information useful to a researcher.
Okay, so I'm clearly a clinician. I had no idea that existed.
We'll return for podcast version 2.
So help me understand the right person for this. This is sort of adults that don't have sleep apnea.
Correct.
Is that it?
So that's the top line.
Okay.
The other nuances I think you've touched on before is who it's for and who it isn't for. So it isn't for someone who already has concerns that they might have sleep apnea. Maybe if such a person used this and got a notification, they might be edged towards care if they were on the fence. But what they shouldn't do is, if they already had concerns, is use this feature and say, well, Apple didn't notify me, so I'm fine.
Right.
Sometimes we say that is a no news is good news approach to the feature. And we would rather say it's a no news is no news.
Right.
So you cannot rely on the absence.
Well,
of
and
the
that kind of
notification.
echoes the concerns that we've had from way back when about consumer sleep technology, that that you worry that somebody's going to be falsely reassured by their gadget and then will sort of dismiss someone saying, hey, honey, you need to go get checked out. Oh, but my watch says I'm fine. So I think
Right.
that sort of switch or that sort of understanding is really important for people to kind of understand what that means.
I completely agree. And it's why I'm so glad we're talking about this here, so we can give maybe the more physician approach that uh, we don't have high sensitivity on purpose, so we
Yeah.
can't hold that stance. But from a user standpoint, the education and the language in the experience is the reminder. From that standpoint, do not rely on this if you have concerns. You should speak to your doctor about your concerns, like full stop.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, right? We're trying to get the low hanging fruit without
Yes.
sort of assuming we're getting everything off the tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then are there other sleep related algorithms that are cooking? Anything we can expect to see?
Well, I can't speak to the future of what might be coming. I will just take a moment, if I may, to mention that our sleep staging algorithm uh, also uses the accelerometer
Okay.
signal, and that validation work is also available on our website, so that people in the field, clinical or research perspective, can see how we approached that kind of validation. Again, in the spirit of transparency and understanding our approach. We also use the accelerometer for overnight respiratory rate, which is part of the Vitals app, to round out the sleep-related algorithms.
Oh, so sleep staging. So is that sort of like light sleep, deep sleep, REM, wake?
Yes, although we're always looking for small ways to help the user experience design,
Okay.
meet people where they are, or explain things in a way that matches what we believe the data is telling them.
Mm.
This example for light sleep typically means N1 and N2 together can carry a potentially negative connotation for users that's somehow not good.
Right.
And so we make that same combination of N1 and N2 together in the category, but we call it core sleep. Just that subtle difference, so that we want to unstick people from this idea that somehow that dominated by N2, which is totally normal sleep.
Right.
People spend their career studying spindles and K complexes and the importance of N2. It is important. So we took that slight move, but that's our 4 categories: wake, core, REM, deep.
Oh, I'm glad you did that, because I have that conversation every single day in clinic, where people are like, hey, I'm only getting like an hour of deep sleep and I'm getting all this light sleep and my sleep is too light and blah, blah, blah. So that's
exactly.
And now I really feel guilty. I can't remember the last time I slept with my Apple Watch. So I really need
to. All right. We won't hold it against you. But this is This is so symbolic of why we're talking, right? We want to at least have the information conversation easily accessible, so that people can use the right, or at least the most current information to make their decision.
Well, it's funny because a million years ago, I was talking to somebody at Fitbit, and they said that the hardest thing was to get people to wear it at night. I'm like, I get that,
Yeah.
It like feels good to take it off. So, okay, I'm going to have to adjust my mindset.
Fantastic. One listener at a time.
So, we're going to be seeing more of these undoubtedly, right? Is there anything else that you want our sleep medicine colleagues to know?
So I would say that, if I can be so bold as to offer 3 summary points, that first and foremost, we want physicians, and especially sleep physicians, to have a sense of our intent here, that focus on high specificity was purposeful, and we want people to have confidence in the notification. Second, that beyond the performance topic, we hope to provide information to support that clinic visit. That one-page PDF that a patient or a user, when they become a patient, can export to show the data that underlied their recent sleep, to see what triggered that notification, to sort of peel the onion back a little bit about how this all works. And finally, that key thing that you've mentioned, and I just want to reiterate, that the absence of a notification does not indicate the absence of sleep apnea.
We'll include a link to that validation work in the show notes for anyone who wants to look at that further. So
Fantastic.
Any final thoughts for us?
I would say that when we, as Apple, say our health features are actionable and grounded in science, I certainly hope hearing about the validation work here on your podcast is a way for the sleep community to get a sense of what we think those statements really mean. And of course, just a friendly reminder that we do all of this health work, including sleep apnea, keeping privacy first with users in control of their sensitive data. Thank you so much for the chance to discuss this feature today.
Yes, of course. That's a really good point. So one of the frustrations we have is, there's all these new technologies that pop up and then we're trying to understand. So we really appreciate your willingness to go through your algorithm and explain this to us and help us better understand how to help our patients who receive these notifications. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to Talking Sleep, brought to you by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. For more podcast episodes, please visit our website at aasm.org. You can also subscribe through your favorite podcast service. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. For more feedback or suggestions, email us at podcast@aasm.org. I hope you'll join us again for more Talking Sleep. Until next time, this is Seema Khosla, encouraging you to sleep well so you can live well.